Step in. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for being here. Jules, you've been a fantastic partner this entire survey. Guys on side up, I think this is going to be a great round. We have an off-choice case. I think it's going to be fun. I think you guys will do well. So, case construct. You're a young, and obviously, honored to be here in a month. You're a young Marxist living in Germany in the year 1900. I want to ask you a very simple question. Do you join the KPD, which is the German Communist Party, which works for Marxist revolution, or do you join the SPD, the Social Democrat Party, which works to institute Marxist reforms through existing political institutions? Any questions?
Here.
So, what time of year is it? 1900 in Germany.
Tell me about the political climate in Germany in the 1900s.
What specifically about the political climate? Like they do?
How's it
like a democratic
reacting to
system?
the entire Marxism thing?
Okay, so, the guys in power, they don't love Marxism.
Yeah, what are they doing?
What are they doing about it? Could you ask a more specific question?
Have they taken any legislative action or any particular action that we should know about?
Are the police beating Marxists in the street? What's going on?
So, Marxists at this point, we're sort of at the cusp of what direction Marxists are going to take. So the question is right now, Marxists can either go in sort of a more violent direction, right, where they try to institute revolution. Presumably, they wouldn't be too big on that, and we can talk about that. Or you can work through existing political forces, just try to get democracy, try to work within that.
Sure. I'm asking how the government is aware of Marxism, right?
Right.
It's not like a secret.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
The government is aware of this political ideology.
Yes.
How has the government reacted to this political ideology?
The government is not Marxist.
Okay, yes, I understand.
Right.
What has it done?
Right, so they're somewhat socially democratic. I just don't understand the question that you're asking.
The question.
Do you mean, are they beating up Marxists in the street? If they're working through political means, probably not. If
So
they're
allowed to freely express. They're not discriminated against.
They're not particularly favored by the political system, but they're not outright.
In what way are they not favored?
They don't have that power because people don't want them to have power at this point.
Okay.
But they haven't really tried yet. The question is, have they?
I like revolution.
That doesn't surprise me coming from you. Not an insult at all. I admire the choice. 3 independent points we want to advance on our House. The first thing we want to talk about in our House deals with the nature of capitalism. Specifically, what we are going to argue in our House is this. Capitalism simply won't collapse, and trying to fight it in the way that they are doing by rejecting the system entirely is a route to failure. First of all, to this point, we think in reality, capital is actually becoming more dispersed. So as the number of factories and private investments increase, employment of the masses in cities grows significantly in relation to the previous feudal society that has existed thus far. So what this means is that everyone is working for profit. The degree is different, but to some point, everyone is benefiting. We think more money and decreased control of means of production, in this case, means that workers do not have to worry about land fertility or adequate tools. What this means is that this increases the amount of free time and educational opportunities that the working class has. We think this inevitably means they expand the number of entrepreneurs recruited from the proletariat in the long run with capitalism. We think this then means that the new middle class is actually then going to close the gap between the management, between the bourgeoisie, and the proletariat. We think because the position of the proletariat has greatly improved over the serfdom of the past, they will be completely resistant to a revolution. Because you are saying, we are going to change the system, which has made you nothing but better over feudalism. Sure, they are not perfect. Sure, their working conditions aren't great. But it is still better than what they have experienced in the past. At the point where the working class is experiencing progress, and will continue to experience some amount of progress, it will be very hard to get them to support the violent revolution that side opposition has chosen to defend this round. For example, South American Coca-Cola factory workers will always say that while their lives are not perfect, it's still substantially better than subsistence farming. But moreover, we think, when the proletariat sees that they can become wealthy through the system, they will be highly opposed to taking any action that would put their gains at risk. So recognize we're not saying that this psychology is correct. We're merely saying that this psychology exists. This is why people who are poor in America are resistant to socialist change, because they think they could be the rich guy. And we think that is the psychology that capitalism ingrains in the proletariat, and that is why the proletariat will never join this revolution in mass, which is why they are doomed to fail on their side of the house. But furthermore, we would say that these new entrepreneurs, this new middle class that will eventually occur no matter which side of the house you choose, will be empathetic to the proletariat, meaning they are likely to support political reforms designed to protect the working masses, which we think will lead to the financial and political backing of the SPD, the party that we are choosing to decide and choosing to back on our side of the house. So recognize we still think there is room for improvement, that workers still face long hours, low wages, and low safety standards. But we think as proven, the proletariat will be resistant to change, so it is preferable to join a political party and change the institutions from within. Do things like legalize unions, institute a minimum wage, institute workplace protections in terms of safety, not right now. We think the impact of this is that a society, on our society, who have many times the advantages of everything just mentioned, progressively moving towards Marxist reform, while doing so in a way that doesn't disrupt the psychology, doesn't go against the psychology that a vast majority of the people in society actually have. But we also think we have to look at religion in this case. Because most people are religious, especially when their station in society is not ideal. We're talking about early 20th century Germany in this case. We think religion teaches people to be steadfastly content with the good aspects of their life and to only care about future salvation. What we think is this means that compared to serfdom, they've seen a tremendous improvements. So now, it's not just logic that tells them that they shouldn't overthrow the current system, but also faith tells them that they should be grateful for the things that have changed in their life, the things that have made their life better, which means they will be resistant to change in another way on their side of the house. Again, compared to revolution, capitalism is guaranteed to work. Maybe the improvements will be small, maybe they will be slow, but on their side of the house, or on our side of the house rather, you're not risking death. You're not risking the end of your life, which is what you're necessarily risking by trying to undertake violent revolution. We think because the proletariat will not join your cause on their side of the house, you are doomed to fail, and that will delegitimize your movement. Now we'll take yours.
Sadly, the revolutionary group will not cease to exist. So how will people react to you when they blow up a freaking building and they're looking at you trying to get into parliament?
You are the Social Democrat Party. You are not looking for Marxist revolution. You are looking for institutional change in the vein of what current German politicians are doing, just on a more radical level. You do not endorse violence, you reject violence, and you completely oppose yourself from the KPD that they are joining. And that is a very simple statement to make. Violence and not violence is possibly the easiest thing that a society can grasp. And I think on our side of the house, the society will fully be able to grasp that. Second independent point we want to advance is the necessity of compromise. We would like to give reasons as to why you cannot defeat the entrenched bourgeoisie. So first, wealth equals the power to create and pay for the increased capital that is making the proletariat better off in the first place. But moreover, they have the monopoly of violence, which is incredibly important in this round. Because guess what? The bourgeoisie, they control the military of Germany, not you, not the KPD. Why? Because the bourgeoisie form the officer class entirely at this point. These are the aristocrats. These are the most privileged members of society. This means that, guess what? The people telling the army what to do, even in the political level, but also at lower levels, are people who have a vested interest in your revolution failing, in your revolution being quashed entirely. Recognize no workers' revolt will ever be able to out-organize and outmaneuver a professional army, especially the German professional army, one of the best ones at this time in history. They have to say on their side of the house how they are going to convince the proletariat to join a movement which consistently loses battle after battle against one of the most professional armies in the world at this time. I don't think they will be able to do it. And without a critical mass of workers, you can't have a hope of winning this revolution on their side of the house. But we also think the bourgeoisie have an interest in not destroying the proletariat, because the proletariat carries the weight of the economy on their shoulders, and without labor supply, the bourgeoisie cannot profit. What this means is they have an incentive to appease the proletariat when they start demanding political change that they can accept that still keeps them in power. So we think when you demand change that we demand, which is simply more labor regulations, but not overthrowing them entirely, they will accept it because they know ultimately the reason why they have value, the reason why they have profit, is because they're taking it off the backs of the workers, and if the workers don't support them, then they think they get worried. They want to appease you on our side of the house, which is incredibly problematic for them. But therefore, we think, by working for compromise compromise, you're actually assured a peaceful political partnership. Because this is good, because you do not have to convince the proletariat to risk death for reforms, but more likely to join you in our 7th House. We think, as Karl Marx stated, the growth of capitalism will lead to an increased demand for urban labor supply, and as the proletariat grows, so will the number of people who will vote for you on our 7th House. And in the future, you can dominate Parliament and dismantle capitalism peacefully and from the inside, a world which never happens on their 7th House. The final independent point we want to advance deals with just war theory, and why we have 2 standards for just war, which they don't meet. First, is the war necessary to achieve the goals? So if you buy either of the first 2 arguments we just made, this isn't true. There are more effective ways to implement Marxist reforms, party-organized worker strikes, union protections and work councils, voting in politicians, all these things exist. But also recognize, killing of innocents, which will happen on their 7th House, is immoral. A revolution will never lead to the death of thousands of innocent proletariats and low-level bourgeoisie, who according to Marx, were also victims. The bourgeoisie weren't always bad. They were often victims of the psychology that their class entraps them in. And on their 7th House, they kill these people for no reason. But secondly, you have to ask, will this actually advance your movement? We think you will fail on their 7th House for all the reasons mentioned, so there will be backlash. The bourgeoisie on their 7th House won't want to appease the proletariat because they see them as a direct threat, and if they appease them, then they become violent. So the bourgeoisie will do everything in their power to prevent a revolution from occurring again. This means worse conditions for the working class, overworked as a punishment, preventing people from having the strength to protest, and assures that unions will never form. You become more monitored, more isolated, and in turn, the proletariat will never again trust a Marxist movement. And this is the most important impact of the round. At the point where this KPD movement fails, and proletariat are killed, Marxism fails as a movement as well, because the proletariat will never buy into Marxist rhetoric. We think Marxist rhetoric has value in the long term, but as an evolutionary approach, and not as a revolutionary approach, and that is why we are glad to propose.
Hear, hear. I thank the Honorable Prime Minister for his most eloquent remarks, and now call upon the Leader of Opposition to deliberate constructive no longer than 8 minutes. Hear, hear.
True honor to be here at UMBC Finals. Deepta has been a pillar during this tournament for me, and I love being here, but it's sort of strange that our first final round is based on the back of a menstrual jug. So, with that said, even though I feel awkward about that, 3 points to make. First thing that we want to talk about off case is that the revolutionary Marxists still exist. This kills their case instantly. Why? Because the very existence of the revolutionary Marxists will create any political opposition that the actual individuals who want to work through German parliament have. All the political opposition that's going to be formed is going to be categorizing these individuals as just revolutionary Marxists of another vein, or as related to these individuals. They're going to categorize Marxism as an ideology which is related inherently to revolution. And guess what? I think Marx actually wrote about something about revolution. So even the literature says, oh, revolt. At that point, we believe that when it is inherently categorized as revolution, you can never escape that categorization. You can never actually have meaningful reform from within. But at the same time, a war is going to break out in Germany, whether you like it or not. There is going to be civil revolt in Germany. The question is, do you take up arms, or do you identify as someone who is not taking up arms, not protect yourself, and watch individuals around you get slaughtered as they're trying to stand up for a belief or ideology that they desperately believe in? We believe that you would rather take up arms, because that is when you're preserving your life. They're saying you're risking bodily harm. Being a Marxist in Germany at this time is going to be risking bodily harm. That is very true. There's no distinction here at all. The question is, do you actually not only attempt to attack, but in the same time, in the same vein, protect yourself? Second thing that we want to talk about is how, ultimately, even if they say that you're going to have congressional change, it's never going to be through Parliament. Why? Because capitalism inherently permanently entrenches power within the bourgeoisie. It ultimately just gives them this polarizing power by actually allowing these individuals to control the way democracy works, to control the inherent processes that actually lead to lawmaking. So, even if you have the most appealing ideology, no one is ever going to buy into it, because your party is going to get stomped into the dirt before it can even grow into the movement they claim that it will. It is ultimately going to be eradicated from the very parliament that it's trying to enter through monetary financing, through all of these things that the bourgeois can take. So at that point, you have no reasonable means to actually enter the German parliament but you still believe that you should have revolution. So, when they can't accomplish their goal, definitely, but our goal has a shot, I would rather take the opportunity which gives you the ability to create immense revolution. And they characterize this revolution as something that will totally end in failure. So I don't think that you, as the sole Marxist in Germany, running into gunfire is the smart way to do this. No, revolutions build a critical mass. The idea that Marx wrote about was not, oh, I'm alone, I'm going to pick up a sword and go against the freaking government. No, he said that there needs to be a critical mass. If you have a revolutionist movement in Germany, I really hope it isn't in the minority and it starts a revolution, because that would be really stupid. What it needs to be in is in the majority, and when it builds that critical mass, that's when the revolution happens. That's when you actually gain that change. And like they say, let's talk about the third point. And the third thing that we want to talk about is ultimately why you're going to get faster change on our side, right? And we think that the faster this change is, the more individuals are going to be undermined. So even if you buy that you get change on their side, we don't believe that this change is going to be significant at the point where you're being consistently undermined by another revolutionary movement. So, if the revolutionary movement succeeds, if there is any change at all, it'll be through the revolutionary movement succeeding. But the very fact that a revolutionary movement existed on the side of your movement is continually going to undermine any political efficacy in the future, which is going to actually undermine the speed of your change. If you are a Marxist, you probably want to see the day where your actual country is a communism. Now, if you never see that day, I don't think there's a point of being a Marxist at all. They start up this case by saying, capitalism is awesome and everyone is getting what they want. This is not what you believe. You believe that capitalism is undermining your very way of life, and that you're being used as a means to an end by individuals in the upper class. On case. The first thing that they talk about is the nature of capitalism, and they say that capitalism is more dispersed, and that these individuals actually have an inherent desire to continue living within this false meritocracy. Fair enough. There is better standards of living, but better in comparison to the very standards which are crappy as it is, still is crappy standards of living. In 1900s Germany, individuals who were actually part of the working class worked immense hours. Children were employed. All of these things which are atrocious, and we consider by modern day standards atrocious, these individuals are subjugated to. At that point, we don't think that people are happy with the standards as they are. Even if there are slight concessions, we don't think that there is any perceivable instance where the individuals in power are going to turn these concessions around and say, no, really, we're going to create a true meritocracy, and we're really going to distribute power. Why? Because people actually have incentives to entrench power, entrench their control within a government and within the upper class. And we believe that they're going to follow these incentives, never empathize with you. Even if these individuals are oppressed, there's never actually an incentive, there's an immense incentive to actually have revolution. They say that individuals are more likely to support political reform. Again, no one is likely to support political reform at all when they see that this political reform has a violent side. You're never going to be able to get rid of that that connection with the violent side of Marxism, and at that point you're never actually going to have direct political reform. Then they say that faith is an opiate. Yes, faith is an opiate, which is why one of their tenets is atheism. Guess what? What you say is that ultimately individuals actually need to change. You disseminate your literature, and then you work off of that in the future. They say status quo is really shitty. Marxist literature is supposed to change individuals' perceptions on status quo. That's the point, and then you have the revolution. Sure.
Is your plan to create Germany into this revolutionary Marxist group to convince all of the proletariat to become atheists?
No, not yes, but over time, you know? It's not like tomorrow, right? But I think it has better efficacy when you try to change people's hearts and minds and then use those people to overthrow the government that you're living in, as opposed to hope that the people who have power will just hand it over to you, which is what they do. This is absurd. The second thing that they talk about is necessary compromise. And they say that the bourgeoisie arms the army and the professional army. And all of these officers are going to just stomp you into the ground. You know what officers command? Soldiers. The soldiers are the proletariat. So when you have those soldiers on your side, I'm pretty sure the officers can't handle being outnumbered. So, we tell you that there's no way that this army is actually going to exist when there is a communist working class revolution. They say that these individuals have an interest in not controlling the proletariat and giving them free rein. Just objectively false. No, not in 1900s Germany,
You're here.
maybe in modern day American society, but that's not what we're looking at today. So this means that these individuals still have a very inherent interest in control. They say that we're going to dismantle it from the inside. Again, the two-faced argument, you're never going to have that. The third thing that they talk about is just war. That you're going to have the killing of innocents, and the bourgeois actually kills its victims, and that you won't trust the Marxism at all. This is a just war. You're being consistently freaking oppressed day after day. Your very life is used as a means to the ends of other individuals. If this government is constantly, metaphorically, taking the lives of other individuals and using them as a means to an end, I can think of no more just war. We happily oppose.
I thank the Leader of Opposition for his most eloquent remarks. I now call upon the Honorable Member of Government to deliver a constructive no longer than 8 minutes. You're here.
Thank you guys. I'm so honored to be here. It's my first final round. You guys are excellent people. Wonderful to be here. I want to start with the very interesting points that RB gives us. I call them very interesting. I'm going to get to why I think they're wrong. First of all, he tells us that the revolutionaries will still exist on our side of the house. That, oh no guys, you as an individual worker have to choose in this case between a revolutionary Marxist group and one that actually seeks to mitigate social change in a realistic way. Understand, Mr. Speaker, that inasmuch as you are the typical worker, you're an individual who has to make a call of yours. We want to actually make the most efficacious call, the call that has long-term solvency. We made that call on our side of the house. Sorry guys, should have picked the other side of the case. I think our side is way stronger. He talks to you about how revolutionaries still exist and how existence means that your opposition is going to be misbranded. Understand, Mr. Speaker, that we actually have the capacity to move away from revolutionary rhetoric on our side of the house. We uniquely do this, Mr. Speaker, inasmuch as he says it's bad to be associated with revolutionaries and they're defending being associated directly with revolutionaries. We definitely win this point. He goes on to talk to you about how being wrongly branded is going to be devastating to you. Understand further, on our side of the house, we actually have the unique opportunity to brand ourselves in opposition to these revolutionaries, to brand ourselves as non-violent agents of change, as individuals who even characterize themselves differently, perhaps as socialists instead of Marxists or communists. We think on our side of the house, inasmuch as we can actually promote a secondary form of rhetoric, a completely actually different political philosophy, we have solvency on our side of the house. We actually have the capacity to disassociate from other revolutionary communist movements and move towards actually making productive change in society. He says that civil revolt will still happen. Further, we say we can stand in opposition to this civil revolt. It's not going to be a big deal. He talks to you about how there won't be change through Parliament, but I don't think he understands this, and I think it's a really unnuanced argument that's disappointing to me. Please understand, we give you actually tangible reasons for why there will eventually be change through government structures. Understand, Mr. Speaker, that when Arby tells you, guys, Marx wrote that we can only achieve these means through revolution, Marx didn't really know what was going to happen in the future. Understand that on our side of the house, inasmuch as you are in this situation, you are a typical worker joining a party that you want to be productive. If you want to see a good outcome, you have to live to see that outcome, Mr. Speaker. Understand that not only on our side of the house do you live to see productive change. On your side of the house, you put yourself in the line of fire automatically. You say, I'm going to lead this revolution right into the arms of a very well-trained army that will probably gun me down. Understand that on their side of the house, you as an individual have no long-term solvency because you're now dead. Further, they talk to you about how revolutions need to build critical mass and how you somehow will have a majority. We tell you that this even untrained majority of communists, even if you do buy that there's a majority, which they fail to warrant, the firepower of the army is not going to be anything that you can really stand up to. We'll handle this more on the on case. Understand further that if you as a communist group are strong enough and have enough ability to raise consciousness, then the threat of upheaval will actually mean that violence is escalated on their side of the house. That the army will just come after you when you start a revolution. They'll come after you before it. They'll take out your leaders. They'll say, we see these people as a threat, and we're going to crack the fuck down on them. We think that uniquely happens on their side of the house. Further, he talks to you about how you want to see mass societal change, and we're not going to see it in our side of the house somehow. Mr. Speaker, we tell you that we actually have real solvency, and further, if you want to see societal change, you need to be alive to see it. That being said, let me jump into what we get from the PMC. I think it was grossly under-addressed by the LO. The first thing we talk to you about is the nature of capitalism. Why, over time, we've actually seen phenomenal change moving towards a better life for proletariat all over the world, especially in this situation, especially in Germany in 1900. Understand further that we have no reason to believe that on their side of the house, they don't even engage with this at all, how we can actually dismantle capitalism. They give you no real warrant for how we're going to somehow break down the structure by leading any kind of revolution in this situation. They say that there's only been a comparative improvement to the quality of life for the proletariat, but we think it's a massive comparative improvement from feudalism. Understand that inasmuch as he refuses to engage with the nuance of this argument, it's going to be really problematic for them. Further, we tell you that we're actually building the proletariat up into something that is no longer oppressed, but more of a middle class. A middle class that is going to have political will. A middle class has free time and has access to more decent pay, more decent living conditions. Understand further, Mr. Speaker, that all he responds to you with at this point is how power entrenchment is happening and how the government's not going to be responsive. But further, we give you actual tangible warrants for why the government is going to be responsive, because placation is going to be useful to them in as much as it does entrench their power in the future. We think we do that better on our side of the house. On their side, what they have to defend is somehow warranting that revolution is not going to look like a threat. The revolution is going to be like kept undercover and kept secret enough that the government won't want to crack down on it preliminarily. We think they will absolutely have to do this. Understand further that we tell you a lot of things about why the proletariat won't actually join the revolution. Why is this the case? Because inasmuch as you're like a 45-year-old person, you remember when your life was a lot worse when you were a poor little boy, as opposed to being a now like sort of middle-class adult. Understand on their side of the house, they have to appeal to individuals who have seen their quality of life drastically improve over their life. Inasmuch as that is true, we think that on our side of the house, these individuals are going to have no impetus to join a revolution out of nowhere because they can appreciate that their quality of life has improved under the status quo government, under a government that has actually helped them out, under a government that has done things for them that has given them tangibly a better life. We furthermore tell you that in our situation, on our side of the house, that we actually have moved towards realistic Marxist reforms. He says that there is no solvency here. All he tells you is that there's still going to be a connection to violence. We tell you why you can actually disconnect from violence, why you have in this situation the unique ability to propagate an idea of non-violence and of actual political solvency on our side of the house. He talks to you a little bit, responsive to our point, about how faith is an opiate of the masses. And he's like, guys, I want to make sure that everyone becomes a Marxist atheist in the long run. And we're just like, oh my God. Like, you heard us all laughing when he said this, and I'm going to laugh a little more right now. Because understand, Mr. Speaker, that trying to break down the faith that has been ingrained in individuals over the course of their life is not going to be an overnight project. It's not going to be a year-long project. It's never going to happen, and it's going to hurt their solvency, especially they radicalize further by propagating ideas of atheism and as well as a revolutionary Marxism. I don't think this is going to have any solvency, but sure, why not?
Oh, you're taking
Yes.
one? Oh, awesome. So you tell us that this is not going to break down instantly. You realize that ultimately these individuals actually have an enormous incentive when reading the literature because it actually shows them the problems with their inherent religion, right? And that there is a more modern middle class.
I'm not really comfortable with you guys resting your case on everyone's going to self-actualize as a Marxist in 6 months. I just don't think that's going to happen. Further, we want to talk to you. I mean, you can't unlearn a faith that you've been instilled with your entire life. It takes longer than that. It's harder than that. It's unreliable for sure. Further, we talked to you a lot about why, and we talked about why soldiers are going to not be able to actually break away from the army and do this. We talked about how the bourgeoisie actually runs, owns, operates, and is in charge of the army. The only response we get to this is that soldiers are part of the proletariat. They're not going to want to break down this industry. But understand, Mr. Speaker, that they're dealing with an army that's not a conscription army. They're not just random proletariat members who are pulled off the street, but rather they're volunteers. They're really well trained. They seem to be something that gives structure and meaning and a paycheck to their lives. But even on our side of the house, we're dealing with an army that's definitely going to come after you, that has a vested interest in following orders because they can't necessarily see that a Marxist revolution is going to end well. Because as individuals who are well aware of the strength of their institution, they're going to know that taking it down is going to really fucking difficult in their house. I don't think he understands the nuance here. Further, they talked to you about how dismantling the government from the inside and bringing about Marxist reforms will never happen. This is just really sad to me, because he decides not to engage with all of the nuanced reasoning that we give you out of PMC as to why it actually will happen. What David tells you, and what I think is absolutely true, and what flows straight through now, is the fact is that you actually have more people in the proletariat moving towards cities, more of an urban labor force that actually does have a vested interest in trying to promote their quality of life, in trying to become parts of the middle class. Those are the individuals that will be your voters, Mr. Speaker. Those are the individuals that will actually vote into office, people who want to carry through reforms that make life better for the proletariat. We think we actually get tangible help to Marxist rhetoric in our side of the house for this reason. Further, we tell you that alternatives to violence are more effective. This goes cold draw, this third point that we gave you here. We think it's also more moral, because understand, Mr. Speaker, that what Marxism was most afraid of, what Marx was most afraid of in writing, was the unnecessary harm to bystanders, basically. He understood that even the bourgeoisie are entrenched in their power not by their own independent choice, but because this is the way the system is built. He said, Mr. Speaker, that you should not necessarily break down individuals in the pursuit of breaking down the system, but that you should work with it. We think on our side of the house, we necessarily have a more moral outcome and a more moral program of change, as well as a more effective one. We are so happy to propose.
I thank you, most honorable member of government, for most eloquent remarks, and now call upon the honorable member of opposition to deliver a 8-minute constructive. Here.
Thanks, everyone. So the first thing Juliana says is that, guys, you either have to pick one or the other, this is an opt-choice case. So yes, we picked the side that we thought was better. We picked the side that was more philosophically consistent. But what we said is, if you go with their side, what actually happens is that revolutionaries will still exist. The idea of a violent revolution will still exist. And whether they like it or not, people are going to paint you with the same brush, even on their side of the house. People are still going to view this political party as the parliamentary arm of the revolutionary of the Marxist cause, right? Like literally the two groups are named KPD and the other is named SPD. There's like one letter of a difference. People are going to see them as like basically the same, right? Like I don't think that people have these kind of nuanced distinctions that they talk about. So our point to that wasn't just that like revolution is bad. What we're saying is, as a result of being cast in that light, that change can't occur in the way that they want it to occur. Because what's going to happen is people are going to view these political leaders as the same kind of violent revolutionaries, and therefore none of the change that they talk about is actually ever going to happen. So what we're saying is, if you actually care about Marxism at all, you have to join our side. If you just want to pay lip service to Marxism and talk about it and just like stand on podiums, you can join their side. But if you actually care about implementing those aims and fighting for those aims and like actively pushing them, then you don't have a choice. You actually have to join our side of the house for that reason, right? RB tells you that you're risking bodily harm on both sides of the house, and Juliana says essentially that there's a higher risk of like losing your life when you choose us. Like we think that's fine. We think that this is a cause that's like worth fighting for, right? We think that this is a cause that's worth dying for. We think that you're not a true Marxist if you don't believe this, right? That if you're not willing to go down and taking down the bourgeoisie fighting. And we also tell you that like there is at the point where there is a risk on their side of the house, then this point at best is a wash for both sides. So I don't think that this actually matters. The second thing we talk about is congressional change. And here's the thing, Mr. Speaker, members of the panel, like the idea of parliament itself, the idea of the German government itself is based in a philosophy that's completely fucking contradictory to the ideals of Marxism. So if you actually try to go through this channel, it's contradicting the idea of Marxism, right? How can you be a true Marxist when you accept that, when you actually buy into that idea, when you buy into the idea that these sort of systems work? The whole point of Marxism is that the government is fucked. The way that they've designed these systems is actually fucked. And I think when you buy into all of that on their side of the house, you look like a fake. You look like someone who's just a demagogue and just paying lip service to the cause, not like someone who's an actual Marxist. If you really actually care about it, you need to join our side of the house. We also say that revolutions build from a critical mass, and RB gives you lots of reasons as to why this critical mass is only going to be gained on our side of the house. I don't think Juliana ever contends these, right? Look, what he says is you want to try and gain the hearts and minds of the people. And on their side of the house, they don't really do that because you just kind of seem like this wishy-washy kind of person who's using Marxism for his own political agenda. Like it doesn't look particularly good. And you're like risking your own life to boot. Sure.
Do you really think if you go in front of the proletariat and say, I want to go into parliament and make sure you get a minimum wage and better working conditions, you will look selfish?
It's not that you look selfish, right? But the fact is, nobody's really going to vote for you because everybody's either going to think that A, you're a violent revolutionary, or B that like or that B you're never going to win, or that you're never going to instate any change because there's just so much like hesitancy and there's just so much like disbelief in the government system, right? Like if I was an average farmer in Germany, I wouldn't believe that the government's working for me, and I don't think you should believe that the government's working for you. I think it's going to be really, really hard to convince them of that fact. You need to be on their level, right? I don't think it's going to be easy for them to see that a politician actually cares about them. This is a very modern idea, right? And I think that it's just not going to happen in the 1900s Germany. We say that we get faster change on our side. That we can, when we actually talk to people and we say, I'm a person just like you. I'm not a politician. I'm not one of them. That you can actually get change to happen. You can actually change people's minds. Again, this isn't really discussed. Every time that they talk about the idea of compromise, every time they talk about working through like the political system, that is exactly the kind of thing we don't want, right? And we only ever get that on our side of the house. So with that, I'm going to go on case. that they make is the nature of capitalism, right? And Juliana's like, how do we dismantle capitalism on our side of the house? So what we say is, you want to work with the people, you want to work on a grassroots level, because it's never going to happen through the bourgeoisie, right? They're basically trying to make it work from the top down. Again, that's never going to happen for all the reasons that Arby talks about that she doesn't address, right? David makes this argument in PMC that, like, the people are deluded. Yes, that's the point. The people are deluded. You know what's actually going to make them change their mind? When they actually see people, like, literally fighting in the streets for them. When they actually see some drastic change occurring, right? Not just some stuffy politician sitting in parliament somewhere. I don't think that's actually going to change their minds or make them believe that this change is ever going to happen. We don't just want a few reforms, guys, at the end of the day. What we want is actual change. We actually want the principles of Marxism to be instated. And I don't think you ever get that on their side of the house. On our side of the house, there is at least a chance that that's going to happen. Okay. Juliana says that the middle class has access to education, and therefore they're more likely to be efficacious. Here's the cool thing: you're middle class. You have access to education. Educate people. Educate other people in the middle class who also have access to education. I think that we can get that on our side of the house as well. They say that the government's going to want to crack down on this revolutionary movement. Okay, so look. As Arby told you, at the end of the day, a government can only function when the people and the soldiers are actually on their side. Like, literally, you can't just have the Kaiser of Germany just sitting there and be like, fight, when none of the soldiers agree with you, right? And what Arby tells you is that you can easily get the soldiers to be on your side. All Juliana responds to this is, all soldiers are volunteers who are really well trained. Okay, so I think that this is a really optimistic, naive view. Sure, they're volunteers, but as they fight over time, soldiers are some of the people who are most disillusioned with these sort of institutions, who are most disillusioned with war, who hate these kinds of things most, who have seen their military commanders screw them, right? I think that they're actually more likely to want to help you. So, like, they don't always have the most positive outlook. I actually think that we get a better chance of them joining on our side of the house than on their side of the house when they're just another guy telling them what to do. Okay, she says over and over again that this change can't happen overnight. And we never said that this change was going to happen in 6 months. Like, she tries to peg us in that light, but that's not what we actually said. What we said is, this needs to happen, and it can happen eventually on our side of the house, even if it's really, really hard. Because guess what? It is going to be really hard. The system is really, really entrenched. But on their side of the house, they're just getting a few measly changes, but at the end of the day, that's not what we want. We want the entire fucking overthrow of the system. That's what being a Marxist means, guys! Okay, the last thing they talk about is the just war theory. Arby tells you that the proletariat is a people who have been consistently oppressed, and Juliana's only response is, Marx cared about, like, the harms. But look, we're not just talking about the harms today. We're talking about the harms that have been perpetuated for centuries, right? We're talking about all the people who have died simply because they weren't a part of the bourgeoisie. We want to help the people. We want to help our children. We want to help the future. We only ever get that on our side of the house. So for all these reasons, we're incredibly proud to.
I now open the floor to speeches. We're now looking for one speech in favor of Gov.
Are we doing them afterwards?
No, we're doing them after Emma.
That's fine, go.
Okay.
I'll do right here.
There are four
Okay,
speeches.
who's doing
Four?
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to be before the Olympics.
Alright.
Because you can bring in new examples.
How many? For how long?
We got,
Yeah, we all say that off.
Yeah, we have no doubt there will be enough. And presumably there's a cross bench as well.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool.
For how long?
2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Just so you know.
oh shit, I need to.
Best joke in the floor speech.
Alright. So first off, are you filming this whole round on your phone?
Yes.
For the people who are wondering where the 45-minute long porn videos with terrible quality come from, that guy. So David talks about how capitalism is good, and David is not the one I want to hear about why capitalism is good. Doesn't David dress and act like your incredibly wealthy uncle that works at Goldman Sachs who cares about poor people too? I know, I love him though, he's right, he's winning hard. David hits on the brilliant point that compromise is is somehow good, which is something that's obviously foreign in the American political system and something foreign to these guys, but compromise might be a good idea somewhere out there to achieving your goals. He tells them that the bourgeoisie are victims of their own system. Again, thank you, Uncle David. How's Goldman Sachs doing for you? And he ends on the argument, he ends on the brilliant argument, you can't always get what you want immediately. Genius. Next out of LOC. So, the first thing he tells you is that capitalism entrenches the bourgeoisie because we all know that no progressive movement has made progress anywhere, especially not in the United States since the year 1880. And he talks about how for a revolution, you need to gain a critical mass of people. Yes, a critical mass of dead bodies are piling up on side opposition because they're getting so much support from the proletariat. Guys, let's have a revolution. Forget about the Paris Commune, that didn't happen. Religion is powerful. Yes, religion is incredibly powerful. That's why blowing up a church and shouting, "I am your God now," is not the best way. So, the only thing that's funny that comes out of Jules is Jules tells them they never tell you how they're going to automatically undo capitalism. Well, I think it's implicit because it's Rutgers hopping magic button. And finally, at the MO, it's the KPD and the whatever PD. Yes, because as we all know, that one letter doesn't make a lick of difference. If anything, it's German where they combine 8 words into one letter, so it probably makes a ton of difference. The idea, they never know exactly, we know what will change their mind is what they close on in the MO. Yes, I know what exactly is going to change their mind. If I'm on one side of a debate, and I'm thinking to myself, there might be some merit to this Marxism thing. I think I'm going to go along. I think I might want to vote for the moderate candidate. But then I see my fellow Marxists get absolutely fucking mowed down, and the German military, who, by the way, real big on rules, these guys. The German military says, don't fucking do that ever again. I'm gonna not ever fucking do that again. Oh God.
Okay, so now we're looking for an ops floor speech. Anybody or? Yep. Okay, great. Here, we also have a concert somewhere.
So you know it's going to be a messy gov case when David answers POCs like this. They're like, David, what's the political climate in Germany right now? Like, well, sometimes it's sunny. Sometimes you can't. They're like, David, can you tell me about the leadership of this group? Like, some of them are tall. Some are cute. Some are not. Some like Kesha. Some don't. It's just like, what do you mean? Meanwhile, I think Hopkins pounding gets a 24. Hopkins pounded like. Anyway, right? Okay, you guys are great pounders. There's just worth that many good points in POC. Army does make a phenomenal point. Hush you had your chance. Army makes a really good point. This is just like one dude, right? This isn't like pick the one that's going to win the entire war. You know what happens on their side of the house? Like they go SPD, they go into the room with all the people, they're like, hey guys, I'm here for the cause. They're like, oh, here's your t-shirt. The beatdowns are coming, so everyone hates us. So we're in the room and we make a lick of change. You know what they get on their side? They still get a t-shirt, don't worry. They get a bath and they're like, here, go buy your oppressors. That's pretty good. But then Jules comes up. She finishes off gates in 2 minutes, which is a record. Only hits like 2 arguments, but she really needs to repeat the really nuanced points that David brings up in PMC. By the way, pro tip, don't call your own points nuance. That's really tacky. But then Jules is like, guys, Marxism. Like, Marx didn't know what was going to happen. They're jumping like ship on Marx, like now? This guy wasn't this smart. I guess we're just going to abandon the guy that created it. I don't know. The theory we're leaving behind every single day. But I want to end on the POI that David asked. Is like, what's going to happen? Or how do you think people are going to react when you go through for the proletariat and you're like, hey guys, I'm here for the parliament. Can you imagine that? They're like, hey guys, I'm part of this radical minority group that no one likes. Reaction? They're gonna be like, you're like, well, I guess you can oppress us, that's fine. Or when you fight, and you can actually be the tipping point. Remember, this case has to bring some sort of advocacy. They can at least try to get revolution. They're just some dudes in a room.
Okay, cross-bench, anybody? Okay, cool.
Vultures. Remember who pays your rent? Sure they do, so. First I want to say that I'm very proud of both teams who are here. I'm a Hopkins dino and a coach of Rutgers, so I could not be happier about this outcome. Unless it was a Rutgers round. But if that's not possible, it's okay. No, in all fairness, I'm very glad Hopkins made it to finals. I don't mean that I'm very pleased that they're skilled enough to get here. I mean, most of the team didn't bother showing for days. And I'm actually glad they made it. Also, if you'll notice that on the board, they're Hopkins 4. That's very fitting, because they're the 4th Hopkins team to run a case I wrote with my partner. So, that's nice. But I don't want to pick on them only. I want to pick on Rutgers a bit, because while I think they argued better than that side, their POI questions and responses were just abysmal. Arby's only POI that he got to give sounded like the old sheriff from Robin and Men in Tights. It was like, I recognized English words, but it was like not in the right order. It was like communism is but revolution something. But then, David gets up here and asks 2 of the most softbally softballs I have ever heard. And they're just like, I don't know what to do. His first question to Arby was, so you're starting a revolution. Do you want to win the revolution and make them believe your ideas? And Arby's like, yeah, no, yeah. And his second question to Dika was like, so in this revolution, you just told me that no one will listen to you in Parliament, but won't they listen to you in Parliament? And she's like, no, yes, wait, no? From now on, just accept the softball. But from my bird's eye view of this round, I learned something very critical in the back, my unbiased bird's eye view. No matter what happened in this round, Adam Bomeisel spent the entire time looking up girls on Reddit. And the reason I'm disappointed is because they seemed kind of average from my viewpoint. I do have actual advice for both sides of the team. Next final round, and it might not apply to you, but it'll apply to everyone else who hasn't been to the show before. Pretend you've been here before. Don't tell me this is your first break. Don't tell me this is your first final round. Pretend like you've been here, because all 4 of you belong in this setting. So, good job.
Okay, after those very eloquent remarks, I now call upon the leader of opposition, to deliver a 4-minute rebuttal. New examples are welcome, new points are not. Here.
Hopefully this speech, words be right ordered. 3 questions. First, who has better political efficacy? I think we do. Why? They give us this la-la land, where everyone is going to accept your radical ideology, going to bring it into the fold, and it's going to grow and blossom over time like the way Marxism is supposed to work. So, I don't think this is true, because we did tell you that this is going to be portrayed in a negative light, and that there is no way to disassociate yourself from the radical Marxist. Well, not radical, true actually, that's the better word, because that's the revolutionary part. And when you do that, when you actually do that, you need to actually keep that like clear, consistent advocacy and just side with the revolutionaries. Why? Because when you do show up to that meeting and get that t-shirt, they're going to also give you their manifesto. Are they going to rip out the fucking chapter about the revolution in it? When people give you their manifesto, are they going to be like, oh, so this is what you subscribe to, but you're doing it peacefully? Oh, revolution, we're not going to worry about that. No! There's no fucking way you can dissociate. But also, we tell you, and this is not addressed at all, the bourgeoisie is going to fucking cripple you. Why? Because there is a distinction, and again I will reiterate, between individuals giving concessions and the bourgeoisie saying, oh, we're going to give up on the meritocracy that we have and ultimately just give you the country on a silver platter. Why is this damning? Because even if they do have concessions, that does not mean that your party will last. It just means that concessions exist and the bourgeoisie is going to stomp you into the fucking ground while trying to appease the proletariat. So, at that point, your party, the one that you're going to be part of, isn't going to last long. So even if you side with them, you're going to be out of work in a week and you're going to be with us anyway. Then they say that like the revolution, but also they don't really address the timetable argument. The revolution is always going to preempt and stop the political change advocacy that you're going to have. They want to paint you a picture where people are getting shot in the streets and churches are getting blown up and people are saying, where is your God now? And while your people are sitting peacefully in parliament, they're like trying to make legislation that is extremely progressive and pro-communist. And everyone's just going to give in to this while fighting the communists. This makes no fucking sense. People are going to be alienated from this political ideology. People are going to hate this political ideology, and you're going to be vilified constantly if you even win a seat, which God knows you won't. So, second question, will the revolution work? So one thing I've learned during floor speeches is that don't trust Hopkins to run a revolution. Honestly. Especially Takish. If the case was Takish is leading this revolution, their side is right. Thankfully, Takish is not leading this revolution, and you should not run into a field of bullets that is riddling your body. We would tell you that there is an intelligent manner to do this, where you build a critical mass over time, where you extend literature, and the army sides with you at the end of the day. And even this army, which they like tout as volunteers, still has investments because they're paid shit, and they need to actually have a better lifestyle, and they want that better lifestyle. So we have that critical mass. We have that changing political ideology. On their side, political ideology is constantly stagnant because ultimately you're never going to have the capacity to like mediate this in parliament in any form or way. Final question is your personal desire, because you're a human being. Remember that. So first of all, we think that you should probably be a true Marxist. It's pretty cool to subscribe to all of your ideology and not try to work for Goldman Sachs on the side and oh, yeah, I'm making wages, but I'm actually a Marxist. We believe that the way you do this is actually by joining the revolutionary side and just completely subscribing to it. But also, we think it's important to remember about your personal protections, because beatings will happen when the radical Marxists exist. Because people will not distinguish between your people getting shot and killed, your party leaders being shot and killed, and the other party leaders being shot and killed. At that point, the question is, you're in an alley, someone's coming for you. Would you rather have a gun, or would you rather just walk towards them and say, come at me, buddy, I'm not like the rest. Please trust me. Oh God, please. I'd rather have the gun. And this is a just war. It is the most just war that you can imagine. Viva la proletariat.
The leader of opposition for his most eloquent remarks, and I'll call upon the Honorable Prime Minister to deliver the closing crystallization, which will be no longer than 5 minutes. And as always, new examples are welcome, new points are not. Hear, hear.
Oh, God. So I want to start with an argument that Deepja makes in MO, because I think it's probably the most important argument for this round. And I'll actually close on it too, because I think it's just that important. She says that the government and the army require the support of the proletariat to stay in power. Bismarck, or whoever the leader is at this time, can't do things by himself. He needs the proletariat behind him. Where? So if this is true and he needs the proletariat behind him, isn't this a great reason why all of those arguments I gave you in PMC that never went responded to as to why the bourgeois has a reason to actually help out the proletariat, to appease them in some way, to give them labor protections, to give them a they aren't abused in the factories, because as Deepta, as side opposition said in this round, they need their support in order to stay in power. This is how you harness it, by not giving yourself a violent physical threat to them, but rather by saying we will work with you if you help us. And all they say is, oh, you're a Marxist, you just care about philosophical consistency. No, you care about workers being oppressed and trying to alleviate that oppression in some meaningful way. Why? Because Marx saw that the revolution is inevitable, that no matter what else you do, communism will arise, but you should alleviate the suffering of the proletariat in the meantime. Only we do that on our side of the house. Remember, you are one person. You don't care about ideology. You only care about what gets changed for you and the people you care about, and the proletariat. On their side of the house, you put yourself in a position where you have no chance of winning this revolution, and you're likely to die in a few months when the government targets you for being a dissident. That doesn't happen on our side of the house, because you're working within a government that everybody else thinks is legitimate. 3 things I want to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is what happens if each side fails. Because yes, they said that our side would fail. They never said why it was particularly bad that it would fail, except that you don't get any change. However, I think if their side fails, they have a huge impact that I made in PMC that would cold drop throughout this round, which is this. If you have a violent Marxist revolution, and that violent Marxist revolution fails, then the ideals of Marx have no legitimacy anymore. If you fail in a democratic setting, that is fine. People fail in democracy all the time, and you try again. If you fail in a revolution, and the precedent that you set is that a violent Marxist revolution will lead to the proletariat being slaughtered, the proletariat will never support Marx again. This is the most important effect of the round. Because I think at the end of the day, all you have to realize is that if you think that we haven't met our burden of proof, I don't think they've met theirs either in saying that their side will win. But if their side loses, you never get Marxist reform at all. And Marx is entirely discredited in Germany forever. Biggest impact. But why, even if they get this critical mass, do they lose the revolution? Because of the military. Because the military isn't a conscript army. It is a professional army of people who said, you know what I want to do with my life? I want to support the German bourgeoisie. These are people who opted into that system. They say that they'll be disillusioned by slaughtering the proletariat. These are guys who have fought wars where they slaughtered the proletariat of other countries without giving a fuck about it. These are guys who signed up for the military, the harsh rules and regulations of the military. They made their choice. They drank the Kool-Aid. They believe in the bourgeoisie entirely. And those people will be able to slaughter a mass of peasants armed with pitchforks and old Maxlock rifles. I don't think they ever proven to you why even if they get the critical mass, they actually get this revolution, which means they discredit Marxism forever. At least we can try again in the political process. They can't. We win the round on that alone. The second question I want to talk about is, will anyone actually join this revolution? Because if they don't access this argument, then they don't even get the efficacy I talked about earlier. So first of all, we have to look at the incentives of an individual member of the proletariat. What do you actually do? They give you a really, really appealing bargain here. So they say, all you have to do in order to be a Marxist revolutionary, give up your religion, like the religion that your family has had for decades, if not centuries, and that's one of the most powerful institutions in Germany. Give up that, forget about it, God doesn't exist, guys. Secondly, they say, you know what? This system that lifted you out of feudalism, that allowed you to at least stay with your children at some point, put some money in your pockets instead of being a subsistence farmer, give that up too. We swear instead this communist system, which is totally unproven, but some guy wrote about it in a book, that'll be really convincing, guys, that'll work. And third, yeah, you'll probably die if you do this, but maybe in the long run it'll work out. Ask yourselves, Mr. Speaker, members of this panel, is this an appealing proposition? Is this a proposition you could ever see a majority of society take? The answer is no, and they put themselves with the burden of proof of saying a majority of the society would take it, and they never absolutely proved that. But even if you think that eventually people will join this militant force of revolutionaries, Jules made an extremely important argument out of ND that just went cold dropped. The argument is this: if it is true that a majority of the proletariat is threatening to the bourgeoisie, then what will they do? When they see convincing leaders convincing people to give up their religion and join a revolutionary Marxist organization, they will simply assassinate them. If you get beat up for being a Marxist politician, you will get assassinated for being a Marxist revolutionary. One, this means, guess what your incentive to join is? You will just get assassinated by the German government. Sounds great, guys, let's do that. But secondly, this means they never actually get this critical mass, because all of your charismatic people, all of your leaders cease to exist on their side of the house. The final thing, yes?
The impact on critical mass because of assassination is a new extension.
Under consideration.
I said, as Jules said in MG, you guys can check your flow. Final question I want to ask is, can you get change in our side of the house. So first you come to the proletariat and you say, hey you guys, so you have the ability to vote, that's pretty cool, right? We say vote for the guy, not the capitalist pig, but the guy who wants to give you some worker protection. That's probably something that most people would at least vote for on our side of the house. But more importantly, the only reason why this isn't true is that you will be labeled as a revolutionary Marxist. I don't think people in Germany are as dumb as Arby and Diepte think they are. When you come out and say, you are a socialist, hell, you're a Democrat who just wants some institutional labor reforms, who just wants to make your life even better, but doesn't want to overthrow the entire system, then guess what? No one will see you as violent, especially if you say, hey, those guys with the K instead of the S in their name, they're fucks, we should kill them, they don't deserve to be here, because they will never work. I think that's a stance we can take. That argument doesn't matter. But what's the killer argument here? The argument I referenced at the top of PMR, which is this. On our side of the house, the bourgeoisie have an incentive to appease you, have an incentive to do something to help you, because they need you in order to work, as Dave just said. That is true. At least, even if we can't get change in the long run, then we get protections which make workers' lives better off, which is what you care about. But finally, we do get change in the long run, because as workers get protections, they have more free time, they have more political efficacy, and you turn from a liberal democracy into a socialist democracy because the proletariat gained political efficacy, an argument made in that PMC which never got responded to. We've won this round extremely clearly, and I am extremely proud to propose.